I've always loved Christmas. The scent of pine needles, the twinkle of lights, the quiet hum of warmth that fills every corner of a home. For years, it was my season to shine. I'd spend days baking cookies, wrapping gifts with gold ribbons, and setting a table that looked straight out of a magazine. But last Christmas was different. It was the first year since my husband passed that I wasn't sure what home even meant. When my son, Daniel, married Emily 2 years ago, I was thrilled. She was bright, confident, and kind. The kind of woman who made Daniel laugh the way he hadn't since college. I thought we'd become close. Not mother and daughter close, but something warm and real. We'd chat occasionally, exchange recipes, and send each other funny memes. So when December rolled around, I naturally assumed we'd spend Christmas together. It started with a simple text. Me. Hey, sweetheart, are we doing Christmas at your place this year? I can bring dessert. I watched the typing bubbles appear, then disappear. A few minutes later, her reply came. Emily. Actually, we'll be spending Christmas with my parents this year. It's been a while since they had everyone together. You can just stay home and rest, okay? Heart. Just stay home. The words hit harder than I expected. For a moment, I thought maybe she meant it kindly, that she didn't want me to tire myself out. But the more I read it, the more it felt like I'd been gently erased from their plans. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the half-finished Christmas cards I'd been writing. The pen felt heavy in my hand. I could almost hear my late husband's voice saying, "Don't take it personally, Nora. Young couples need their space." But it was personal. It always is when family becomes optional. I thought of Daniel as a boy. The way his eyes used to light up when we decorated the tree. The years he'd sneak downstairs early to shake the presents. How many times had I stayed up late stitching his Christmas stocking, making sure everything was perfect. And now I was just unnecessary. I tried to be gracious. I really did. The next day, I called Daniel. "Hey, honey," I began, trying to sound casual. "I heard you're spending Christmas with Emily's family this year." He hesitated. "Yeah, Mom, I meant to tell you sooner. It's just been crazy with work." I forced a smile, though he couldn't see it. "Of course. You should go. They deserve to see you both." He sighed. "We'll visit you after New Year's, okay?" "Of course," I repeated. "Have a wonderful Christmas." When I hung up, the silence in the house was deafening. The next few days were a blur of pretending I was fine, pretending I was excited for a quiet Christmas. But every time I saw an ad for holiday dinners or happy families in matching pajamas, I felt a little more invisible. I went through the motions, hung the wreath, lit a few candles, but it all felt hollow. I tried calling a few friends, but they were all busy with their own families. I even thought of volunteering at the shelter, but when I called, they said they were already full for Christmas Day. I ended up spending that night on the couch, watching old home videos. Daniel was 7 and 1, running through the snow with a red scarf trailing behind him. I laughed, then cried, then laughed again. That was when it hit me. I couldn't do another Christmas like this. A week later, while having coffee with my neighbor, June, I told her everything. She listened quietly, stirring her cup, then said, "So, why don't you go somewhere?" "Go where?" I asked, half laughing. "Anywhere you want," she said. "You've spent your whole life making holidays perfect for everyone else. Maybe it's time to make one for yourself." Her words lingered long after she left. That night I sat at my computer, searching for flights. Not really planning to book anything, just browsing. Until I saw it, a discounted ticket to Vancouver. Daniel had mentioned Emily's parents lived there. Something inside me stirred. Not anger, exactly, more like a quiet determination. I didn't want to intrude. I didn't want to cause a scene. I just wanted to be near them, to not feel so far away. The next morning, before I could talk myself out of it, I booked the ticket. Departure, December 23rd. Return, December 28th. I didn't tell Daniel or Emily. I told myself I'd just enjoy the city, see the lights, walk the markets, maybe surprise them with the gift. It wasn't about confrontation. It was about reclaiming a piece of my joy. When I landed in Vancouver, snowflakes were drifting lazily through the air. The city glowed with Christmas lights, twinkling reds and golds reflecting off wet streets. The air was crisp, full of wood smoke and cinnamon. I checked into a small inn downtown, right near Stanley Park. It was cozy. Fireplace, garland over the mantel, a small Christmas tree in the corner. For the first time in weeks, I felt alive. That evening, I wrapped up warmly and wandered through the Christmas market. Couples laughed, children clutched cups of cocoa, and carolers sang by the fountain. I bought myself a mug that said, "Believe." It felt symbolic, not just for the season, but for me. Believe that I still mattered. Believe that love could still find its way back. On Christmas Eve, I stood outside Emily's parents' house. It was beautiful. Big windows glowing with light, laughter spilling out into the night. I could see Daniel through the window, helping Emily's father with something by the tree. He looked happy. My chest tightened, not with jealousy, but with longing. I didn't want to interrupt. I didn't want to ruin their evening. I just wanted to see him, to feel like part of his world, even from a distance. Then the front door opened. Emily stepped out with a tray of cookies. She froze when she saw me. "Nora?" she said, surprise and something else, guilt, maybe, flickering in her eyes. "Hi, dear," I said, forcing a smile. "I was visiting the market nearby and thought I'd drop off a little something." I held up a small gift bag. She looked at me for a moment, unsure what to say. Then she stepped aside. "Come in." Inside, warmth hit me like a wave. Fire crackling, soft music playing, the smell of pine and roasted turkey. Daniel appeared, stunned. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I swallowed. "I just wanted to wish you both a Merry Christmas in person." Emily's mother approached, smiling kindly. "You must be Nora. We've heard so much about you. Please, stay for dinner." I hesitated. "I don't want to intrude." "Nonsense," she said. "There's always room for one more." For a moment, I caught Emily's expression, conflicted, maybe embarrassed, but she said nothing. Dinner was awkward at first. Conversation felt forced. But then Daniel started telling stories from his childhood, and laughter slowly filled the room. Emily's parents were gracious. Her father even complimented my stuffing recipe that Daniel had tried to recreate. By dessert, the tension had softened. As we sipped coffee, Emily turned to me and said quietly, "I didn't mean to hurt you, Nora. I just thought maybe you want some quiet this year." I smiled gently. "I appreciate that, sweetheart, but sometimes quiet feels a lot like forgotten." Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry. I never wanted you to feel that way." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You're learning. We all are." That night, as snow began to fall outside, Daniel hugged me tight before I left. "I'm glad you came, Mom," he whispered. "It wouldn't have felt right without you." As I walked back to my hotel under the soft glow of streetlights, I realized something beautiful. Sometimes you don't need to be invited to belong. Sometimes you just have to show up with love, with courage, with faith. When I woke the next morning in the little Vancouver inn, The world outside my window was painted white. Snow had fallen through the night, piling gently on roofs and branches. The streets were hushed, as if the city itself were holding its breath for Christmas morning. I made coffee in the tiny room kettle and sat by the window watching families walk by, children tugging sleds, couples holding hands. For a moment, I wondered if Daniel and Emily were opening gifts. Were they thinking of me? Or was I just a small ache that had already faded? Still, I felt lighter than I had in months. Something inside me had shifted last night at their dinner table. Being there, even awkwardly, had reminded me that love isn't erased by distance or discomfort. It only hides, waiting to be looked at again. I was halfway through my coffee when there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, Daniel stood there, hair tousled from the cold, cheeks pink, holding a paper bag. "Mom," he said, smiling sheepishly, "I brought breakfast. Emily's mom insisted we drive some over." I stepped aside, laughing softly. "Come in before you freeze." He laid out croissants and fruit like he used to on Sunday mornings when he was little. For a while, we just ate, quietly enjoying the smallness of the moment. Then he said, "Emily feels awful, Mom. She didn't mean that text the way it sounded." I nodded. "I know. She's young, and she's still figuring out what family looks like when you marry into one." He hesitated. "She thought you might not want to travel after Dad." That name, the one I hadn't heard spoken aloud in so long, hung in the air between us. I looked out at the snow. Losing your father made holidays complicated, but complicated doesn't mean unwanted. Daniel's eyes softened. "You should have told me how much it hurt." "I didn't want to be a burden. I thought if I stayed quiet, you'd come on your own." He reached across the table and took my hand. "Mom, you could never be a burden." The words settled over me like warmth returning to cold fingers. Before he left, Daniel pulled something from his coat pocket, a small wrapped box. "Emily made this for you," he said. "She wanted to give it last night, but lost her nerve." I opened it carefully. Inside was a delicate silver ornament in the shape of a heart. Etched in tiny letters, "Family is everyone you hold close." For a moment, I couldn't speak. "Tell her thank you," I whispered. He smiled. "Better yet, tell her yourself. We're having brunch tomorrow. Come join us." My breath caught. "Are you sure?" "Positive," he said. "It's Christmas, Mom. You belong there." The next day, I arrived at their apartment clutching a box of cinnamon rolls from a bakery near my inn. Emily opened the door, her eyes red but smiling. "Merry Christmas, Nora," she said softly. "Merry Christmas, dear." Inside, music played low, Bing Crosby crooning "I'll Be Home for Christmas." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. We both laughed. "I hope you like cinnamon," I said, handing her the box. "I love cinnamon," she replied, and it felt like a tiny bridge forming. Brunch was lively. Her parents, siblings, and a few cousins filled the table. I helped pour coffee, passed plates, and told stories Daniel used to beg me to repeat. Every now and then, I caught Emily watching me, not warily this time, but thoughtfully, as if seeing me with new eyes. After the meal, she asked if I'd join her for a walk. The city park was blanketed in white, children throwing snowballs, dogs bounding joyfully. Emily and I strolled quietly until she finally said, "I owe you an apology." I said, "You already said that last night," I reminded her gently. "This time I mean it properly," she said, stopping to face me. "I thought I was protecting our little family, but I ended up cutting you out of it. I never wanted Daniel to choose between us." I studied her face, the sincerity, the nerves. "Marriage makes everyone protective," I said. When I was your age, I fought my own mother-in-law over Christmas dinner. She wanted ham, I wanted turkey. We didn't speak for months. She laughed through tears. What fixed it? Time, I said, and realizing love doesn't shrink when it's shared, it grows. She nodded slowly. Can we start over? I smiled. We just did. We kept walking, our footsteps soft in the snow. That evening, Daniel drove me to the waterfront where he and I used to feed ducks when he was a boy. Lights from the boats shimmered across the water like tiny stars. Dad loved this spot, he said quietly. He did, I replied. He'd tell you to make sure your wife never spends Christmas without feeling loved. Daniel slipped an arm around my shoulders. I think he'd be happy you came. I looked up at the night sky. So do I. For a long time, we just stood there, mother and son, silent but connected, the way snow connects sky to earth. Two days later, it was time to fly back. Emily and Daniel drove me to the airport. At the gate, Emily hugged me tight. Next year, she whispered, Christmas at yours. I'll bring the cinnamon. I laughed. Deal. As I boarded, I glanced back to see them waving, hands entwined. It didn't feel like goodbye. It felt like coming home, even as I left. When I returned to Chicago, the house felt different. Not emptier, just peaceful. I unpacked slowly, hung the silver heart ornament on my own tree, and watched it catch the morning light. Maybe families drift and stumble. Maybe we miscommunicate and wound each other without meaning to. But sometimes all it takes is one small act of courage, a flight, a walk, a shared meal, to remind us we're still connected. That flight hadn't just changed Christmas, it had changed me. I'd learned that love isn't about invitations. It's about showing up with grace when you're forgotten and leaving space for others to find their way back. It's strange how one Christmas can change the rhythm of a whole life. A year later, I still remember every sound of that snowy morning in Vancouver, the crunch of ice under my boots, the way Daniel said "Mom" like it was a new word he'd just remembered, the trembling warmth in Emily's voice when she whispered, "Can we start over?" Those memories had become a quiet echo in my house, an echo that didn't hurt anymore. This December felt different. I didn't dread the calendar this time. The decorations didn't feel heavy with loneliness. When I unpacked the box of ornaments, I didn't cry over the ones marked Daniel's first Christmas or our first home. Instead, I smiled. Each piece carried a story, a time I'd loved, lost, and learned again. I realized grief softens over time. It doesn't disappear, but it learns to sit quietly beside you instead of clawing at your chest. That morning, as I hung the silver heart ornament Emily had given me, I ran my thumb over the engraved words. Family is everyone you hold close. It no longer felt like a gift from guilt. It felt like a promise. The phone rang just as I plugged in the lights. Daniel's name lit up the screen. "Hey, sweetheart," I said, smiling before I even heard his voice. "Mom," he said, sounding breathless, "Emily wants to ask you something." I laughed. "You two always sound like you're about to tell me you bought a boat." Emily's voice chimed in. "We didn't buy a boat, but we did buy something small, a onesie." It took me a second, then the meaning hit. "Oh my goodness," I gasped. "Emily, are you—" "We're having a baby," she said, tears in her voice. "You're going to be a grandma." I sat down, the lights still flickering around me, the room spinning with warmth. "Sweetheart," I whispered, "that's the best Christmas gift you could have given me." The next few months passed in a blur of baby names, ultrasound photos, and phone calls filled with laughter. Emily sent me pictures of the nursery colors, asked for my recipe for chicken soup, and even called once for advice on stretch marks. Each time, I tried to sound calm, but inside, I was a flood of joy. I didn't realize how deeply I'd missed being needed, not in the way of chores or advice, but emotionally needed. Emily didn't treat me like an outsider anymore. She treated me like a second mother. Sometimes I'd catch myself thinking of my late husband, Robert. I'd whisper into the quiet kitchen, "You'd love her now. You'd be proud of them both." One morning, I found an envelope in my mailbox with no return address. Inside was a folded note written in a familiar hand. "Dear Nora, I wanted to say what I couldn't back then. When I told you to stay home last Christmas, I thought I was protecting our space. What I didn't realize was how much space I was taking from you. Thank you for showing me what grace looks like. Love, Emily." Tears blurred the ink as I read it. I pressed the letter to my chest. Forgiveness wasn't just about being sorry. It was about seeing each other clearly again. By the next Christmas, the baby, Lila Rose, had arrived. Daniel and Emily invited me weeks in advance, no hesitation in their voices this time. When I landed in Vancouver again, Emily was waiting at the gate, holding a sign that said, "Welcome home, Grandma." I laughed through tears. Lila was bundled in her arms, pink cheeks, tiny mittens. Emily handed her to me gently, as if she knew this was the moment that would stitch everything together. "She has your eyes," Emily said softly. "No," I smiled, rocking the baby. "She has yours, gentle and curious." That night, after dinner, we sat by the fireplace. Daniel was reading aloud from "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," and Emily was leaning against him, Lila asleep on her chest. I sat back, watching the glow flicker across their faces. I thought about the woman I had been 2 years ago, the one who'd eaten dinner alone, afraid of being forgotten. I wanted to reach back through time and tell her, "You are not replaceable. You are still part of the story." I smiled to myself. "Mom?" Daniel said suddenly. "You okay?" "More than okay. I'm home." Later that night, when everyone was asleep, I stood by the window and watched the snow fall. The streetlights turned it to gold. I thought of how small acts, one dinner invitation, one plane ticket, had rewritten the ending of our story. Not by changing others, but by changing me. Forgiveness didn't erase the hurt. It simply built something stronger around it. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do isn't fight to be included. It's to show up with love, even when you weren't asked to. Because love, when it's real, always finds its way home.